Okay, Boker Tov. Yeah. Boker Tov. Happy Sunday, Shavua Tov. Thank you, Itzik, for coming up with a beautiful idea. We can all learn a little bit and have breakfast together. Claude, merci. Thank you so much for the breakfast.
Thank you for everybody that is here.
Amen. The class will be in memory of two special neshamot. One is Hannah Bat Penina, who passed away last Shabbat in Eretz Yisrael. Last Sunday in Eretz Yisrael, Nishmata Began Eden, and also for the elevation of the sister. Also for the elevation of the neshama of Ronit Bat Elimelech, who is my mother-in-law, the mother of my wife Rivka. Rivka Bat Rosa Shoshana. Bezrat Hashem. Iran Tova Bat David HaKohen. May all their neshamot, Bezrat Hashem, have an Aliyah to Gan Eden. Bezrat Hashem. Okay, thank you guys. As you know, we're following Rav Schwab and the prayer, and the seder of the prayer. And today we're going to talk about Bircat Hashachar, right? As we mentioned before, there are 15 brachot that just right, literally in a row that we say every single morning. Now we said before that the prayers in the morning, they mimic the construction, the physical construction of the Bet HaMikdash, right? And the 15 brachot here correspond to the 15 steps that the Kohen Gadol would actually step up to go into the Holy of Holies, right? But if you look at a little bit closer on the brachot, it's amazing. You know, we have a tendency to just kind of say the brachot without thinking much about them. And if you see, like, there is a seder, an unbelievable seder in terms of how we wake up in the morning versus how the brachot are actually laid out for us. Now, the source of the brachot, and we're just going to focus on kind of the general 15 brachot, and maybe next week we'll start to go into the brachot, right? But there's a lot to talk about. The source of the brachot, there are two sources for these 15 brachot, right? One is brachot in the Talmud Brachot 60b, which lists them according to the usual order of how someone wakes up. And then, of course, there's 3 additional brachot, which are in the negative. It's Shelo Asani Goy, Shelo Asani Aved, Shelo Asani Isha, that come from Menachot 43b. And they're not related at all to the order of the rising. So we have to address like why they were inserted here among the order of the rising. Let's get into this. So the Gemara says, the very first one we say it's a very odd bracha, right? It talks about a rooster and a rooster crowing, and that the rooster has the knowledge to distinguish between the night and exactly when the night turns into day, right? So what's this bracha all about? So the Gemara continues. It says Kishama kol tarnegola, which means what? When he hears the rooster crowing, meaning we do, we are to say a certain bracha, which means la sechvi bina leavchin ben yom uven laila, to distinguish, who Hashem gave the heart understanding to distinguish between the day and the night, right? That's the first bracha. Now, what happens after right when we wake up and we recognize it's day? We touch our eyes, right? Baruch pokeach ivrim, who gives sight to the blind. Because the first thing we do is we wipe our eyes, right? What do we do next? We start to sit up, right? So when we start to move our limbs and start to sit up, what do we say? Matir asurim, who releases the bound, right? Because all night we're bound in our bed. We don't really move much. Of course, when we get up, it's a bracha. So we have to thank Hashem for that. Now what happens next? We get dressed. What's the next bracha? Malbish arumim, who clothes the naked. We get up. What happens when we stand up? We say zokef kifufim, who straightens the bend, right? Who gets up? We get up. Thank God we're able to get up. When his feet go on the floor, with what we call the terra firma, the earth, he says, Roka ha'aretz alamayim, who spreads out earth upon the waters, right? Then, of course, when he takes a step, we say, Amechin mitzadei gaver, who firms man's footsteps, right? Who allows us to walk, basically. Then we tie our shoes, which is basically, She'asa li kol tzarki, who has provided me with every need, right? And then he puts on his belt. And then it said that's corresponding to Ozer Yisrael Bigvura, who girds Israel with strength, right? Then he covers his head. We put a kippah on, and that bracha is Oter Yisrael B'tifara, who crowns Israel with splendor. Kippah is like a crown. Then, of course, we say the bracha of Hanoten Laya'ef Koach, who gives strength to the weary. This one's not mentioned at all in the Gemara. at all in the Gemara. I see the Anshe Gedolah, Knesset Anshe Gedolah, just happened to put this in, but there's no source in the Gemara for this one. Then we find these three brachot that we mentioned before, that we thank Hashem for not making me a Gentile or a slave, or for not having me made a woman. Okay, now on the surface, these brachot may seem to be incredibly insulting to the non-Jew, to the woman, and even to the slave. Okay, so we have to address it. We're not going to try to sweep it under the rug and try to pretend it's not there. We're going to address it, right? And why? So, and why is it also why did the Rabbanim insert it right here? You literally have 15 brachot, and these are brachot numbers 12, 13, and 14, right? So you have blessings 1 through 11, which follow the Seder of getting up. Then all of a sudden, before the last one, the 15th one, they inserted these brachot, and then the question is, why, right? So it's really noteworthy, actually, to note that the Minhag Sephard had these three brachot listed at the very end. In other words, they were blessings 13, 14, and 15. But we don't go by Minhag Sephard, at least I guess the general consensus is, according to the Gemara, that this is the Minhag that we have today, is to insert them before the last one. Okay? Now, let's talk about the meaning of the word sichvi, right? Because the first bracha is Asher Natan la sichvi bina, right? Which basically means he has given the rooster understanding. Now, we all live in an urban society, right? When's the last time anyone here heard a rooster crowing? We don't hear a rooster crowing. So what's this bracha all about, and is it relevant today? So the word sechvi, according to Rashi and Tosafot, is a rooster, right? We know that. And actually in Arabic, the word rooster is called sechvi, right? That's from Rosh Hashanah 26a. The word bina is derived from the word ben. What does ben mean? It means to distinguish between things, right? So, meaning, the bracha means that Hashem, at the time of creation, gave the rooster the unique understanding, the innate understanding, to discern between levchin ben, between the darkness of the night and the impending daybreak, which is when he starts to crow, right? So, if you look at the size of the brain of the rooster, which is probably no bigger than a rock or a pebble, for the rooster to have such insight into the exact moment when the night is the darkest, when it starts to turn into light. It's really a miracle, right? But the idea is, if one doesn't hear a rooster crow, right? For instance, in our society today, technically you shouldn't make the bracha, right? Because you don't hear the rooster crow. However, according to Tosafot, the bracha was intended to give thanks to Hashem for the existence of the cognitive ability to discern between night and day, right? So, according to the students of Rabbeinu Yonah, followed by the Rosh, the word sechvi has another meaning, which is more applicable to us. It's that of seeing, or what we call insight. Insight. What does that mean? Insight of the heart, of the lev, right? So in the early morning, as the day breaks, we have a wonderful feeling of great anticipation that we're going to do great things for the day, right? Let me ask you something. Everyone looks forward to the morning? Everyone wakes up like a lion, ready to tackle the day? I hope we do. But do you have that same feeling at night? No, you don't have that same feeling at night. Baruch Hashem, the day's over, I'm going to relax. No, you don't have the same emotions that are evoked at night than you do during the day. The day, thank God, we woke up, it's a blessing, we're ready to attack the day, right? So Hashem also gave the Jewish people the mandate, of course, to enlighten the world. That's what we are, or lagoyim, right? So even if He obviously gave us the Torah, which gives us great truths about the world, and it's our job to teach these truths to the world, because it says in Shemot, Mamlechet Kohanim v'goy kadosh, right? We are a kingdom of ministers and a holy nation, right? Kingdom of priests, right? So we gratefully acknowledge Hashem, our spiritual leadership in this world, and that's why we say Ha'olam Shilo Asani Goy, which we will talk about soon. Okay? Now, the three brachot, let's address them right now since we talked about them. Say again, and on the surface they could be very, very insulting to the slave, to the non-Jew, and to the woman, right? But in the language, let's talk about the word goy, which unfortunately has been used in a derogatory way in modern times. But the sages really classify a goy as just a non-Jewish nation. That's all it is. It's not derogatory whatsoever. A goy is a non-Jewish nation, or it's a member of the non-Jewish nation, right? So it's important to understand, like these three brachot, why are they said in the negative? Like why couldn't we just be politically correct today and say, thank you Hashem for making me a Jew. Thank you Hashem for making me a man. Like the woman says, thanks for making me as you commanded. And thanks, whatever. Why is it in the negative? So here we get a very, very interesting debate that happened between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel, right? And the debate comes up as this. They were debating whether, since a person comes into the world and he commits so many sins and so many averot, and he's tainting his precious neshama, right? The question came up is, perhaps it would have been better from a Kiddush Hashem perspective if he wasn't created at all. This is literally a debate between Shammai and Hillel whether man should have been created. Would the world have been better off, if you will, if man wasn't even created, right? So eventually the matter was decided by a vote. And it says it would have been better for most people other than tzaddikim that man had not been created. Can you understand the power of this sentence? That it would have been better from the perspective of Kiddush Hashem that man would not have been created. Why? Because all we do is sin all day, right? And obviously when you sin, you do Chilul Hashem, right? The exact opposite of Kiddush Hashem. So we're talking from the perspective of Kiddush Hashem. The opposite is Chilul Hashem, and when we sin, we create Chilul Hashem. So from that perspective, it would have been better if man and humanity would not have been created, right? So therefore, because of this very reasoning, we say achshav shenichra, which means what? Now that man was created, yefashpet b'ma'asav, which means what? He should make the best of it. So in other words, because we're here, now we got to make the best of it, right? So because we make the best of it, we don't express the bracha in the positive, we actually express it in the negative, right? Because we understand that under the circumstances, we are thankful shelo asani goy. Right? We are thankful, Shelo Asani Avid. We are thankful because we should not have been created. Right? So hopefully that addresses that. Now these three brachot, they obviously stir a lot of criticism, and those who don't really understand it can use this to kind of poke at Judaism, saying, look how chauvinistic the religion is. Look how they think they're superior over the non-Jewish. That is not the case whatsoever, and let's address that. This is very important because we need to arm ourselves with this knowledge that if, God forbid, someone does approach us, we understand how to respond. Okay, so the tzaddikim, they ask the question, okay, upon deeper reflection, let's get a deeper picture. When we say Shelo Asani Goy, does that mean that Hashem didn't make me like, and literally, Metushelach, that tzaddik, who is not Jewish, that Hashem withheld the Mabul for 7 days. He delayed the flood of the world for 7 days in the merit of Metushelach, a non-Jew, right? Or like Noah, who's called, is the only person in Tanakh who's called Ish Tzaddik. Remember, Yosef HaTzaddik was not called Tzaddik from the Tanakh. The rabbis gave him the title of Tzaddik. The only person in Tanakh is Noah, who's called Ish Tzaddik, on whose merit mankind exists today. The entire non-Jewish world, 7.5 billion people, exist because of Noah today. Or like Shem and Ever, right? Who were the teachers of Yitzchak and Yaakov. They have the yeshiva, Shem and Ever, right? Or Yitro, whose honor that has a parsha named after him, right? Or Eov, who is called Avdi Eov, right? My servant Eov, right? He was almost, they say, the sages, almost as great as Avraham Avinu, right? So in other words, there is no insulting here of the non-Jews. There are plenty of examples of non-Jews that this world exists because of them, right? So when we say Shelo Asani Aved, now let's skip over to slavery, right? Did it not say that the servant of Abraham, Eliezer, who was incredibly great, did it not say, it says, Hamishel bechol ashelo, which is explained by Rashi to mean he ruled over his Yetzer Hara just as his master Abraham did? I mean, literally, and Abraham tasked Eliezer to go find a wife for his son. I mean, do you understand the greatness of Eliezer? So they said that furthermore, Eliezer was known as what we call Damasik Eliezer, which means what? He watered the world with the teachings of his master Abraham. This Eved, quote, slave, was Zoche to Nisim, miracles, in this search for his bride, Yitzchak. So that's only one. There's another servant called Tovi. Tovi was the servant of Rabban Gamliel, right? whose master testified that he was a Talmid Chacham and was worthy of smicha. Worthy of smicha, and he said that all the sages would line up and get advice from Tovi, the servant of Rabban Gamliel. So you can't, there's no derogatory here, servant. You have to understand that this is not a derogatory bracha, God forbid, right? Okay, or it says also the handmaiden of the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, right? To whom the sages would come with their questions also. This is in the sources Rosh Hashanah 26b and Moed Katan 17a. So the last bracha, does it mean Shelo Asani Isha, that Hashem did not make me like a woman, right? What? Hashem didn't make Sarah, Rivka, Rachalea, the prophetess Devorah, or Esther Malka. He didn't make like women that were literally, that saved the world. Queen Esther saved the Jewish people, right? Therefore, it's therefore clear that the bracha don't represent an arrogant or eminent superiority of the male Jew, right? Over a non-Jew or over a servant over women. What are these brachot all about? If we weren't, so you understand, let's talk about the women, right? The women, the sages tell us that they're not bound by mitzvot that are bound by time, right? They're not bound, right? Men have an obligation to pray, right? The prayer time, there are a lot of mitzvot that the men have to do that the women are just simply exempt because for whatever reason they have other obligations. You can say that their neshama is on a higher level, that Adam was created from the dirt of the earth, but Chava was created from his ribs, so she's on a higher physical level. There's so many explanations, but the point is, it's not a derogatory statement towards women. Thank you, Hashem, for making me a man so I can fulfill more mitzvot, so I can pray to you, so I can fulfill more mitzvot, so I can do all the obligations that the women are just happen to be exempt from because they are in certain respects on a higher level than man. You're thanking Hashem for allowing you to do the mitzvot. Same thing when you say Shelo Asani Goy. The Goys they only have 7 Noahide laws, 7 mitzvot. We have 613. We're thanking Hashem for the opportunity to do these mitzvot. It's not a derogatory statement whatsoever. On the contrary, we're thanking Hashem for giving us the privilege of communicating with Him. So what's the point of all these tefillot? What's the point? Like the pshat, like the bottom line is to open up communication with Hashem. That's all it is. That's why Hashem gave us the Torah. In addition to illuminating the world, when you even go peel off that layer, it's communication with Hashem. So we are trying to teach the world about how to have a relationship with Hashem. And I'll end on like one story from the story of creation, that we all know the story about Adam and Eve, and Hashem told them, don't eat from this particular tree. And of course, they ate from the tree, and that was the kind of the downfall of humanity. And ever since then, we're trying to rectify that original sin, right? And what happens when Hashem said, hey, what's going on here? Adam, of course, said it's her fault. And of course, she said, no, it was the snake. The snake did it, right? So what was the punishment Hashem gave to the snake? You remember? Hashem says, because they said the snake was upright before, so we're going to cut off your arms and your legs, and you're going to walk on your belly for the entire eternity, right? You ever ask yourself what kind of curse this is? When you're walking upright, if the snake was existing today, he'd have to bend down to search for food. He'd have to make more effort than if he was just crawling on the belly. Hashem gave him actually not a curse, a bracha. It's easier for the snake to find food. What kind of curse is this? It's easy. But you want to know what the curse is? The curse is Hashem cut off the communication between the snake and Hashem. That because the food is now so readily available to the nachash, the snake, there's no need whatsoever for the snake to pray to Hashem to find food. So something you would think is like a curse, oh, now he's going to have to sliver on his belly for entire eternity. No, you can look at it and say, oh, look at the bracha. The food is now readily available. He sees mites, he sees gerbils, he sees whatever he wants is really at his fingertips, right there. All he has to do is, hide and grab the food. But the real curse is that Hashem cut off the communication from the snake to talk and pray to Hashem for finding food. So this should be a lesson to us, Bezrat Hashem. As you read the 15 brachot, Bircat Hashachar every morning, it is setting the stage for the entire day of communicating with Hashem. And that's really the in French we say the but, the ultimate goal for the Jew is to communicate with Hashem, because we have to understand that all the source of brachot come from that relationship. It's no different from a relationship between a parent and a child, and just like that communication has to flow back and forth, that's exactly what Hashem wants from us. So we're going to say Kaddish again. Leilu Nishmat Chana Bat Penina.